Friend, have you ever felt like something keeps pulling at your heart? Maybe a door closed and you don't understand why. Maybe you're facing delays, disappointments, and setbacks. But what if I told you that's not a mistake? That's God trying to tell you something. He's shifting things in your favor. He's aligning you for something greater. But the question is, are you listening? Too often, we get frustrated when things don't go our way. But what if the no was actually a not yet? What if the rejection was actually protection? What if the delay was because God is setting you up for something bigger? My friend, God is always speaking, but are we paying attention? Today, I want to share with you 10 powerful ways God might be trying to tell you something and what you need to do about it. Sometimes in life, we knock on doors that never seem to open. We try, we pray, we push, we do everything we can, yet the opportunity never comes. That relationship we wanted so badly, it crumbled. That job we thought was the answer, someone else got it. That business idea we poured our heart into, it failed. And in those moments, we ask God, why? But what if I told you that closed door wasn't rejection, it was a redirection, it was divine protection. It was God's way of saying, I have something better in store for you. Think about a child who wants to touch fire. The child doesn't understand why their parent keeps pulling them away. To the child, it seems unfair, feels like they're being denied something. But the parent knows the fire will burn them. The parent isn't trying to ruin their fun. They're trying to save them from harm. In the same way, God pulls us back from things we don't yet understand. That relationship that broke you, you thought it was love, but God saw it would drain your soul. That company that didn't hire you, you thought it was your dream job, but God knew it would keep you small, keep you stuck, keep you from becoming who you were meant to be. A young woman once cried over a man who left her. She begged God to bring him back. She told herself, he's the God, I know it. But God saw what she didn't. He saw how years later that same man would have crushed her spirit, destroyed her confidence, and made her doubt her own worth. And what happened? That man married someone else, and she was devastated until one day she met someone who loved her like she never imagined. Someone who cherished her, honored her, respected her, and in that moment she looked back and whispered, thank you, God, for closing that door. When a door closes, it hurts, it's confusing, it makes us question everything. But if you look back at your life, how many times have you seen that what you once wanted wasn't really what you needed? How many times have you prayed for something only to realize later that God had something far greater planned? That's why faith isn't just about believing when things go right. It's about trusting when things go wrong. It's about knowing that a closed door is not the end of your story. It's just the beginning of a better chapter. Imagine you're at an airport waiting to board a flight. You have your bags packed, your ticket in hand, and you're ready to go. But then suddenly the airline announces that your flight has been canceled. You're frustrated, you're upset, you think, God, why? I had everything planned, but what you didn't know was that the plane you were supposed to get on had engine trouble. What you didn't see was that God was protecting you from something dangerous. Now, you're forced to wait, forced to take a different route, forced to sit in discomfort. But what happens next? The new flight you get on takes you to an even better destination. It puts you in the seat next to someone who will change your life. It opens a door that you didn't even know existed. God doesn't close doors to punish you. He closes them to prepare you. He closes them to shift you into something greater. If every door opened for you, you would never be stretched. You would never grow. You would never learn to trust Him fully. Closed doors teach us patience. They teach us faith. They teach us that just because something is delayed doesn't mean it's denied. A man once lost his business. He thought it was over. He questioned God, asked why He would take away everything he worked for. But what he didn't realize was that God had to remove that business so He could start something bigger, something that would not just bless him, but bless thousands of others. What felt like failure was actually a setup. What looked like defeat was actually a divine redirection. And years later, he looked back and said, if I had never lost that business, I would have never discovered my true purpose. There's a story of a man named Joseph in the Bible. He had a dream that he would be a great leader. But instead of walking into success, he was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and falsely accused. Every door seemed to close for him. Every road led to disappointment. But what he didn't know was that God was setting him up for something far greater. Because years later, the very prison he was locked in became the stepping stone to his palace. The very people who betrayed him had to come back and bow before him. The closed doors in his life weren't punishment, they were preparation. You may not see it now, but the doors that are closing in your life are not the end. They are the divine detours leading you to something far greater. That's why you have to stop begging for doors that God has already closed. Stop knocking on things that are no longer meant for you. Stop holding on to what God is trying to remove. Because every time a door closes, it simply means something better is coming. Maybe you're in a season where nothing seems to be going your way. Maybe you're frustrated, wondering why things aren't happening fast enough. But let me tell you this. Just because the door didn't open today doesn't mean it won't open tomorrow. Just because the relationship ended doesn't mean love isn't coming. Just because the opportunity didn't work out doesn't mean God isn't setting up something greater. The job you didn't get, the relationship that ended, the opportunity that fell through. It wasn't the end. It was the shift. It was the redirection. It was the sign that God is leading you somewhere higher. So the next time a door closes, don't panic. Don't question your worth. Don't think you're forgotten. Instead, stand in faith. Stand in confidence. Stand knowing that God is taking you to something far beyond what you could have imagined. Because when one door closes, another is already being prepared. And when it finally opens, you'll look back and say, now I understand. Now I see what God was doing all along. You've been praying, working hard, doing everything right, yet the breakthrough hasn't come. The promotion hasn't happened. The relationship hasn't arrived. The dream hasn't materialized. You see other people moving forward, doors opening for them, and you start wondering, God, why am I stuck? Why are things taking so long for me? But what if I told you, your delay is not a denial. Your delay is divine timing. Think about a baker putting a cake in the oven. If you take the cake out too soon, it's raw, unfinished, not ready. If you rush the process, you ruin the outcome. But when the timing is just right, when it's fully baked, fully developed, then and only then does it come out perfect, exactly as it was meant to be. God is not denying you. He's preparing you. He's making sure you are fully equipped, fully strong, fully developed for what He has in store. A young woman had been waiting for years to find the right partner. She watched as her friends got married, had children, built families, while she remained single. She cried out to God, "What's wrong with me? Why are you making me wait?" But what she didn't realize was that God was still shaping her, still refining her. He was protecting her from the wrong people, from relationships that would have broken her spirit. And when the time was right, she met someone who was everything she had prayed for and more. And then she understood, had she received love too soon, she wouldn't have been ready to handle it. Think about an archer pulling back a bow. The farther he pulls it back, the greater the force, the greater the distance the arrow will travel. In the same way, the longer your delay, the greater your destiny. The more God holds you back, the further He is about to launch you. The delay is not a punishment. It's the preparation for something bigger than you can imagine. Maybe you've been praying for a promotion at work. You've worked hard, given your best, yet others keep getting ahead. You see people who don't work as hard, don't have the same integrity, yet they are moving forward while you're stuck in the same place. It's frustrating, discouraging, makes you question everything. But what if God is not giving you that promotion yet because He knows it's not the right time? What if He's holding you back because He's preparing a position that's even greater than what you're asking for? What if He's waiting for the right people to be in place, the right circumstances to align so that when He finally moves you forward, no one can stop it? A man once lost his job unexpectedly. He was devastated. He had bills to pay, a family to support, and he couldn't understand why God had allowed it. But instead of giving up, he kept trusting. He kept believing. For months, he struggled. For months, he knocked on doors that wouldn't open. But then, out of nowhere, a better opportunity came. A position with more pay, more benefits, more stability. And when he looked back, he realized if he hadn't lost his job, he never would have found the opportunity that was truly meant for him. The delay was not a setback, it was a setup for something greater. Have you ever been stuck in traffic, late for an important meeting, frustrated that everything is slowing you down? You sit there, angry, questioning why this is happening. But what you don't see is that just up the road, there was a massive accident. If you had been on time, you might have been right in the middle of it. The delay wasn't to harm you, it was to protect you. God's timing is perfect, even when we don't understand it. Think about a farmer planting seeds. When he puts the seeds in the ground, he doesn't see results immediately. He doesn't wake up the next morning expecting a full harvest. He knows there is a process. He knows there is a season for growth. Just because he doesn't see the results right away doesn't mean nothing is happening beneath the surface. In the same way, just because you don't see things moving doesn't mean God isn't working. Your dreams, your prayers, your desires, they're taking root, they're growing. And when the time is right, they will flourish in ways you never expected. There was a man who desperately wanted to start his own business. He had the vision, the passion, the drive, but every time he tried, doors kept closing. He faced rejection after rejection, setback after setback. But what he didn't know was that God was waiting for the right moment. Because years later, when he finally got the opportunity, it was bigger than he ever imagined. The resources were there, the connections were there, and had he started earlier, he wouldn't have been ready to handle that level of success. What seemed like a delay was actually divine alignment. Sometimes we think we are ready, but God sees what we can't. He sees the challenges ahead. He sees the lessons we still need to learn. He sees the maturity we still need to develop. If he gave us everything we wanted right now, it might destroy us instead of bless us. That's why he waits. That's why he delays. Not to hold us back, but to make sure we are truly ready for what he has in store. A caterpillar doesn't turn into a butterfly overnight. It goes through a process, a transformation, a waiting period inside the cocoon. If you try to force it out too soon, you cripple its wings. It needs time to develop. It needs time to grow. And when it finally emerges, it is strong, beautiful, and ready to soar. In the same way, your waiting season is not wasted. It is the very thing that is making you stronger, making you wiser, making you ready for the life that is waiting for you. You had a plan. You mapped everything out. You were certain that things were going to go one way, but suddenly everything changed. The opportunity fell through. The relationship ended. The business deal collapsed. The door that you thought was wide open suddenly slammed shut in your face. And now you're standing there confused, frustrated, asking, why, God? Why would you let this happen? But what if I told you that what looks like a disruption is really divine adjustment? What if the very thing that feels like a setback is actually a setup for something better? Imagine you're driving to an important destination and suddenly your GPS reroutes you. The road ahead is blocked and now you're forced to take a different path. At first, you're irritated, thinking, this is slowing me down. I was supposed to go that way. But what you don't see is that up ahead, there's an accident. There's danger on the path you were originally taking. And if you had stayed on that route, you might have never reached your destination. The detour wasn't there to delay you, it was there to protect you. In life, we experience these kinds of divine detours all the time. You thought you were going to marry that person, but they walked away. You thought that job was your dream job, but you got laid off. You thought your plan was solid, but life threw you a curveball. It wasn't the way you planned it. But what if it was the way God planned it? What if he saw something you couldn't see? What if he was redirecting you to something greater? A young man had a vision of starting his own company. He worked hard, poured in all his time and energy, and just when he was about to see success, the business collapsed. He lost everything. He thought, God, why would you let this happen? But what he didn't realize was that the failure was an adjustment, not a punishment. That failure pushed him into a new direction, one he never would have chosen on his own. And years later, he found himself in an even bigger, more successful business that he never saw coming. Had his first plan worked out, he never would have reached his true destiny. Sometimes God has to shake things up to get us to move. If everything always went according to our plan, we'd stay comfortable, stuck in places that were never meant to be permanent. We'd settle for less than what he has for us. That's why he disrupts things, not to hurt us, but to push us. That's why he lets people walk away, because they weren't meant to be part of your future. That's why he closes doors, because he's leading you to something better. Think about a mother eagle teaching her baby to fly. At first, the baby eagle is comfortable in the nest, warm and safe, but if the mother never disrupted the nest, if she never stirred things up, that baby would never learn to fly. So one day, she starts removing the soft feathers from the nest. She makes it uncomfortable. She forces the baby to move until eventually it has no choice but to take a leap. And when it does, it discovers what it was always meant to do. It spreads its wings and soars. Maybe your life just got uncomfortable. Maybe things just got shaken up. That's not a sign that God has abandoned you. It's a sign that he's preparing you to fly. That's a sign that he's moving you out of a place that was only meant to be temporary. A woman had been at the same job for years. She was comfortable. She had security, but she wasn't growing. One day, out of nowhere, she was let go. She was devastated. She thought, God, how could you let this happen? But what she didn't realize was that if she had stayed in that job, she never would have stepped into her calling. That job was her nest. And when it was taken away, she was forced to spread her wings. A year later, she started her own company, living her dream, doing what she loved. And she realized what she thought was a disruption was actually God's adjustment. Joseph in the Bible had a dream that he would be a ruler. But before he saw that dream come to pass, his life was disrupted in the worst way. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, thrown into prison. It looked like everything was falling apart. But what Joseph didn't know was that every disruption was actually an adjustment, positioning him for his destiny. Every setback was setting him up for the palace. And when the time was right, he became second in command of an entire nation. You see, sometimes God has to take you the long way around. Sometimes he has to close the door on what you thought you wanted so he can open the door to what you really need. Sometimes he has to make things fall apart so that something greater can come together. Imagine a child playing with a broken toy. He's clinging to it, refusing to let it go, even though it's damaged. But what he doesn't know is that his father is holding something better behind his back. The father is just waiting for the child to release what's broken so he can give him what's new. That's how we are sometimes. We hold on so tightly to what we think is best, not realizing that God has something so much greater waiting for us. That relationship that ended, that was God's adjustment. That job you didn't get, that was God's adjustment. That opportunity that didn't work out, that was God's adjustment. He's not punishing you. He's redirecting you. He's aligning you. He's setting you up for something bigger, something better, something you never saw coming. You feel it deep inside, an uneasiness, a discomfort, a sense that something isn't quite right. On the surface, everything seems fine. You have a stable job, good friends, a routine that makes sense. But deep in your spirit, there's this nagging feeling, a restlessness that won't go away. It's like an alarm going off in your soul, telling you that where you are is no longer where you're meant to be. That restlessness is not random. It's not something you should ignore or suppress. It's a sign, a divine nudge. God is speaking to you, trying to get your attention, trying to tell you that he has more for you. But if you're too busy trying to silence that feeling, you might miss what he's trying to show you. Think about a bird in a cage. For years it's been comfortable, singing its songs, satisfied with its small world. But then one day something shifts. It starts pacing back and forth. It flaps its wings against the bars. It doesn't understand why, but suddenly the cage that once felt safe now feels confining. That's what restlessness does. It's the feeling that you were made for more. It's your soul telling you it's time to fly. Maybe you're in a relationship that looks perfect on paper, but inside you can't shake the feeling that something is off. Maybe you're in a career that pays well, but you wake up every morning with a sense of dread. Maybe you've been in the same city for years, but now everything in you is pushing you toward change. That's not just coincidence. That's God stirring something in your spirit. That's God saying, I didn't create you to stay stuck. I didn't design you for comfort. I designed you for growth. A young woman had been working the same job for nearly a decade. It was safe, secure, predictable, but deep inside she started feeling restless. She ignored it at first, telling herself, I should be grateful. I have a steady income. I shouldn't be complaining. But no matter how hard she tried to push it away, the feeling only grew stronger. It wasn't until she finally leaned into that restlessness that she realized it wasn't dissatisfaction, it was direction. That restlessness was God's way of moving her toward her true purpose. And when she finally took the leap, she stepped into a career that not only paid the bills, but also fulfilled her soul. That's how God works. He doesn't always send a loud voice from the sky. He doesn't always write the plan out in bold letters. Sometimes He speaks through an inner knowing, a discomfort that makes it impossible to stay where you are. That restlessness isn't meant to frustrate you, it's meant to free you. Think about a mother eagle with her babies. At first, she builds them the softest nest, a place of comfort and security. But as they grow, she starts removing the soft feathers, making the nest prickly and uncomfortable. The babies don't understand why their safe place is suddenly so painful. But what they don't realize is that the mother is preparing them to fly. If she left the nest comfortable, they would never leave. They would never become who they were meant to be. Maybe your life just got uncomfortable. Maybe everything that once felt easy now feels unsettled. That's not a mistake. That's God making the nest uncomfortable so you'll stop settling for a life that's beneath your calling. That's God whispering, I have something greater for you, but you have to trust me enough to let go. There was a man who had lived in the same small town his entire life. He had a stable job, a nice house, good people around him, but something inside him kept nudging him, telling him there was more. He ignored it for years, afraid to leave what was familiar, but the more he resisted, the more restless he became, until finally he took the risk. He moved to a new city, stepped into a new opportunity, and found a level of purpose he never could have imagined. Looking back, he realized the restlessness was never the problem. The problem was his fear of what was on the other side of it. God doesn't create restlessness to torment you. He creates it to move you, to shift you, to prepare you. You weren't designed to stay in the same place forever. You weren't created to settle for less than His best. That inner stirring, that feeling that won't go away, is His way of getting your attention. Imagine a tree planted in a small pot. At first, it has plenty of room to grow. But as time passes, its roots start pressing against the sides. The soil becomes tight. The very thing that once provided nourishment now feels like a prison. The tree can't grow anymore unless it's transplanted into bigger soil. That's exactly what happens to you. The place that once felt like home might start to feel too small for the person you're becoming. The friendships that once made sense might start to feel misaligned. The job that once felt fulfilling might start to feel draining, not because something is wrong with you, but because you're outgrowing the space you're in. Restlessness is not a curse, it's a calling. It's God's way of saying, there's more in you, there's a bigger plan, but you have to trust me enough to move. You can ignore it, you can distract yourself, you can pretend everything is fine, but deep down, you know you were meant for more. You know that feeling is not going away. The question is, will you trust what God is trying to show you? Will you let go of the familiar so you can step into the fullness of what He has for you? You had a plan. You had it all mapped out. You knew exactly how things were supposed to go. The job, the relationship, the opportunities. You could see the road ahead so clearly. But then, out of nowhere, an obstacle appeared. A rejection letter, a closed door, a setback so unexpected that it shook you to your core. You tried to push through it, but no matter how hard you worked, the road was blocked. It felt unfair, confusing, and frustrating. You wondered, why is this happening? Why would God let me get this far only to stop me now? But what if I told you that obstacle wasn't meant to stop you? What if it was meant to redirect you? A man once had a dream of becoming a professional athlete. He trained every single day, sacrificed everything for the sport he loved. He was so close. One final season, one last shot at making it. And then injury struck. Just like that, his dream was gone. He was devastated, lost, unsure of what to do next. But what he didn't see was that the very setback he hated was the setup for something greater. Because while he was recovering, he discovered a love for coaching, for mentoring young athletes. Years later, he built a business, impacted thousands of lives, and found a purpose far beyond what he had imagined. If he had never been injured, he would have never found the thing he was truly meant to do. That's how God works. You see an obstacle, but he sees a detour. You see disappointment, but he sees direction. You think something is being taken from you, but he's actually giving you something better. The problem is, when we face obstacles, our first reaction is to fight them. We resist, we question, we panic. But what if, instead of trying to bulldoze our way through, we paused and asked God, what are you trying to show me? What are you protecting me from? What are you preparing me for? Think about a person driving to an important meeting. They've got the GPS set, they're following the route, and suddenly, road closed, detour ahead. They're frustrated, thinking, I don't have time for this. But what they don't realize is that just a few miles ahead, there was an accident. If they had continued on that road, they would have been caught in it. That detour wasn't a delay, it was a divine redirection. Maybe you're facing an obstacle right now and it feels like everything is falling apart. Maybe you didn't get the promotion, the loan didn't go through, the person you loved walked away. It feels like a setback, but what if it's actually a setup? What if God is rerouting you because the path you were on wasn't leading to your destiny, it was leading to a dead end. A woman spent years working toward a position at her company. She was dedicated, hardworking, and convinced that this promotion was hers. She prayed for it, believed for it. But when the decision was made, they gave it to someone else. She was devastated. It felt like the biggest disappointment of her life. But what she didn't know was that just 6 months later, her company would go through major layoffs. Her entire department would be cut. The position she fought so hard for would have been eliminated, leaving her without a job. Instead, because she wasn't tied down, she found an even better opportunity, a dream job she never would have considered if she had gotten what she originally wanted. Sometimes what we think is rejection is really protection. Sometimes God has to block the door so you don't walk into something that will waste your time, drain your energy, or break your heart. The obstacle in front of you isn't there to defeat you, it's there to redirect you. Picture a child trying to reach for something dangerous, a hot stove, a sharp knife. Their parent steps in, blocking their path, pulling them away. The child doesn't understand. They cry, they get frustrated, but the parent knows something the child doesn't. The parent knows that what they're reaching for isn't good for them. That's exactly how God works in your life. He's not blocking things to hurt you. He's blocking things to help you. You might be facing an obstacle that seems impossible to get past. You might feel like you're stuck, like no matter what you do, things just won't go your way. But what if you're not stuck at all? What if you're just being shifted towards something greater? There was a young man who dreamed of opening his own business. He had everything planned out, saved every penny, poured his heart into making it happen. But every time he tried to launch, something went wrong. His deals fell through. His investors backed out. It felt like failure after failure. But what he didn't know was that just a few months later, a major economic crash was coming. If he had launched his business at that time, he would have lost everything. Instead, because of the delay, he was able to wait for the right moment. When he finally opened, he found massive success. What seemed like obstacles were actually divine detours. What seemed like setbacks were actually saving him from disaster. So often, we're so focused on what we've lost that we don't realize what we're being protected from. We cry over missed opportunities when, in reality, God was closing the door because He has something far better in store. We get frustrated with delays when, in reality, He's positioning us for something greater. You were never meant to stay in the same place forever. Sometimes God allows obstacles to push you out of your comfort zone. Sometimes He lets things fall apart so you can step into something better. The very thing you think is working against you might actually be working for you. What if instead of fighting the obstacle, you trusted the detour? What if instead of seeing it as a block, you saw it as a blessing in disguise? There's a voice inside you that's quieter than the noise of the world, softer than the chaos around you, yet stronger than any storm you will ever face. It doesn't shout, it doesn't beg for your attention. It simply whispers. And if you're too busy, too distracted, too caught up in the rush of life, you might miss it. But when you take the time to listen, that still small voice will change everything. A man was about to make a huge business deal On paper, everything looked perfect. The investors, the numbers, the potential profit. Everyone around him told him to go for it. But deep inside, he had a small, unsettling feeling. It wasn't fear. It wasn't doubt. It was just a quiet nudge. Something he couldn't shake off. Logically, it made no sense, but something inside him said, wait. Against everyone's advice, he backed out. Months later, the deal collapsed. The company he almost partnered with went bankrupt, and he would have lost everything. That still, small voice had saved him from disaster. How often do we ignore that voice because it doesn't match our plans? How often do we brush off that inner hesitation because we think we know better? We're so used to looking for loud, dramatic signs, flashing lights, writing on the wall, a voice booming from the sky. But God doesn't always speak like that. Sometimes He whispers. Sometimes it's just a subtle feeling, a quiet knowing, a sense of peace or unrest that we can't explain. A woman was in a relationship that seemed perfect. Her partner was kind, charming, everything she had prayed for. On the surface, there were no red flags, but deep inside, there was a restlessness. A small voice kept telling her, something isn't right. She couldn't explain it, but she felt it. She tried to ignore it, convinced herself she was just overthinking. But the more she ignored it, the stronger it became. Finally, she listened. She ended the relationship, even though it made no sense at the time. A year later, she found out that the person she was with had been hiding a double life, deceiving her all along. That still small voice had been trying to protect her. So many times we override that voice because we don't understand it. We look for logic when God is speaking through intuition. We expect explanations when He's simply asking us to trust. That still small voice isn't random, it's divine guidance. It's God steering you away from danger, leading you toward purpose, protecting you from things you can't see yet. Think about a mother walking with her child. The child sees a beautiful flower in the distance and runs toward it. But right before they reach it, the mother gently pulls them back. The child is confused, upset. Why would she stop them from getting something so beautiful? But what the child doesn't see is the snake hiding in the grass. The mother saw it, and in her wisdom, she didn't shout or scream. She simply pulled the child back. That's how God speaks to us. It's not always loud. It's not always obvious, but it's always in our best interest. A man was about to make a major move. He was ready to leave his job, pack up his life, and relocate to a new city. Everything seemed to be falling into place. But every time he sat down to finalize his decision, something inside him said, not yet. There was no logical reason to wait. He had an opportunity waiting, a plan in motion. But that quiet voice inside him wouldn't let him move forward. Frustrated but obedient, he delayed his plans. A few weeks later, he got an unexpected job offer in his own city, one that was better than anything he had hoped for. If he had ignored that small voice, he would have left behind his biggest blessing. Sometimes that still small voice is calling you to wait. Sometimes it's telling you to move. Other times it's warning you to walk away. But no matter what it's saying, it's always leading you to something better. The problem is we don't always like what it tells us. We want to hear yes when it's saying no. We want to move when it's telling us to stay still. And instead of trusting it, we argue with it, we question it, we push it aside. But the truth is that inner voice is God's way of speaking to you. It's not your mind playing tricks on you. It's divine wisdom nudging you in the right direction. A young woman had a dream of starting her own business. She was passionate, driven, and ready to take the leap. But every time she moved forward, she felt hesitation. Not fear, not doubt, just a quiet whisper telling her to wait. It didn't make sense. She had the resources, the skills, the drive. But she listened to that voice and waited. A year later, an investor approached her, someone who believed in her vision and offered to fund her business in a way she never imagined. If she had ignored that voice and rushed ahead, she would have struggled alone. But because she listened, she was positioned for something far greater. That still, small voice will never lead you wrong. It's the reason you walked away from the opportunity that looked perfect, but wasn't meant for you. It's the reason you felt uneasy about that friendship, that deal, that decision, even when there was no obvious reason to. It's the reason you took a different route home, only to find out later that there was an accident on your usual path. But here's the key. You have to be still enough to hear it. You have to quiet the noise around you. the opinions, the pressure, the distractions. If you're constantly caught up in the rush of life, you'll drown out that inner voice. You'll move ahead blindly, ignoring the very guidance that's trying to lead you. That whisper inside you isn't small because it's weak. It's small because it requires faith to hear it. It doesn't force its way in. It waits for you to listen. It's not loud like the world because God's voice isn't in the chaos. It's in the stillness. There are moments in life when you pray for a sign, for an answer, for some kind of direction, and it doesn't come the way you expect. You wait for a loud voice from the sky, a supernatural moment where everything becomes crystal clear. But what if I told you that God has been speaking to you all along? Not through thunder and lightning, not through fire from the heavens, but through people, through words, through messages, disguised as everyday conversations. A man was struggling with a decision about his career. He had two opportunities, one that seemed logical, safe, and stable, and another that was uncertain but aligned with his true passion. He prayed, asking God for clarity, but nothing happened, no dream, no vision, no miraculous sign. Frustrated, he went to lunch with an old friend, not expecting anything profound. In the middle of their conversation, his friend said, "You know, sometimes the safest choice isn't the right one. Sometimes you have to step out in faith." Those words hit him like a lightning bolt. His friend wasn't even talking about his situation, but in that moment he knew it was God answering him through another person. How many times have you ignored the words of someone speaking directly to your situation? How many times has a message found you at the right place at the right time and you brushed it off as coincidence? There are no coincidences when it comes to divine guidance. God uses people to deliver His words to you. That conversation with a stranger, that sermon you stumbled upon, that book you picked up randomly, it was never random. It was orchestrated. A woman was heartbroken after a failed relationship. She kept replaying the past, blaming herself, wondering what went wrong. She begged God for a sign, for an answer that would bring peace to her heart. One day she was sitting on a park bench when she overheard a mother speaking to her child. The little girl was crying over a broken toy. And the mother gently said, "Sweetheart, I know you loved it, but sometimes things break so we can have something better." That one sentence, meant for a child, struck the woman's heart in a way she couldn't explain. She knew in that moment God was speaking directly to her pain. God's messages are everywhere, but we have to open our hearts to receive them. Sometimes He speaks through the encouragement of a friend who tells you don't give up. Sometimes it's through a mentor who tells you you are capable of more than you think. Other times it's through the unexpected wisdom of a stranger who reminds you you're exactly where you need to be. But here's the key. You have to be listening. You have to pay attention. A young man had given up on his dreams. He had tried and failed so many times that he finally told himself, maybe this isn't meant for me. One night he was scrolling mindlessly on his phone when he came across a video of someone saying, "Your failure isn't final. Keep going." It felt as though the message had been placed there just for him. He felt something stir inside him, a renewed sense of hope. That was God. That was a divine message reaching him in the way he needed at the moment he needed it most. Think about how many times you've turned on the radio and heard a song that spoke exactly to what you were going through. How many times have you opened a book and landed on a page that seemed to answer the very question in your heart? That's not an accident. That's God using every possible way to communicate with you. A woman was drowning in worry, overwhelmed by fear about the future. She felt like she had no control, like everything was slipping through her fingers. She sat in a waiting room scrolling through her phone when she saw a quote, "God is already in your tomorrow, stop worrying." It wasn't a person speaking to her, but it was a message directly for her. She took a deep breath, and for the first time in weeks, she felt peace. God doesn't just speak through people. He speaks through signs, through written words, through unexpected encounters. A billboard on the side of the road that says, "Trust the process." A message from an old friend that says, "I just wanted to remind you that you're stronger than you think." A sermon you didn't even plan on listening to, yet every word feels like it was custom made for you. That's not luck. That's divine communication. Sometimes we miss God's messages because we're looking for something dramatic. We think if God really wants to speak to me, He'll make it obvious. But He doesn't always work that way. He speaks in ways that require faith, in ways that require you to be paying attention. He speaks through everyday moments, everyday conversations, everyday people. A father was worried about his ability to provide for his family. He felt like he was failing, like he wasn't enough. One evening, his little daughter climbed onto his lap and said, "Daddy, you always take care of me." Those words broke him. He realized in that moment God was reminding him that he was doing enough. That simple statement from a child carried more power than any sermon because it was exactly what he needed to hear. God's messages are all around you, but you have to stop dismissing them. That friend who encouraged you wasn't just being nice. That stranger who gave you unexpected wisdom wasn't just talking. That book, that quote, that song, that sermon, those weren't coincidences. They were answers. They were the very words you had been waiting for. You've been waiting, searching, asking for a sign. But what if I told you the signs have already been there? What if I told you that the whispers of God have been woven into your life all along? The messages, the people, the moments. They weren't just passing events. They were divine interventions, carefully placed, waiting for you to open your eyes and recognize them. Too often, we expect God's voice to shake the earth, to part the skies, to arrive in a dramatic revelation that leaves no room for doubt. But the truth is, His voice is in the stillness, in the quiet nudges, in the words that come from unexpected places. The right message at the right time is no accident. The people who encourage you when you feel like giving up, the words that give you hope when you're ready to walk away, the random quote that speaks directly to your heart, these are not coincidences. God has been speaking. The question is, are you listening? The world will try to drown out His voice with distractions, with noise, with fear. Doubt will tell you that those messages were random, that the encouragement was just luck, that the confirmation you felt was your imagination. But deep down, you know the truth. You know when something is more than a coincidence. You know when a message lands in your soul in a way that nothing else could. You've been asking for direction, and God has been answering in ways you didn't expect. When you prayed for strength, He sent you people who reminded you who you are. When you asked for a sign, He placed words in front of you that shook you awake. When you were ready to quit, He sent a message that said, "Not yet, keep going." You weren't meant to live in confusion. You weren't meant to walk through life wondering if you're alone. God has always been with you, guiding, speaking, moving. He's aligning things in ways you cannot yet see. You may not understand it now, but one day you'll look back and realize every person, every message, every divine detour was leading you to exactly where you were meant to be. So here's what I want you to remember. When life gets hard, when you feel lost, when you don't know what to do next, pause, listen, pay attention. The answers you seek may already be around you, waiting for you to recognize them. That conversation, that song, that book, that unexpected encounter, those are divine messages. There is no such thing as luck when it comes to your destiny. The people who cross your path, the moments that change you, the words that hit you at just the right time, it's all connected. The pieces of your life are not scattered. They are placed with purpose. And when you finally understand that, when you start recognizing God's voice in the everyday moments, you'll never feel lost again. Because you'll know He's been speaking to you all along. You just had to be willing to listen.